Hello and welcome again, this is ralfidude. I'm going to be doing a review on the X55 Rhino. Just so you guys aren't holding your breath, my decision in the end is I will be returning this stick back to Cytec. But let's start from the very beginning. This is your X55 Rhino. Now, the reason why I bought this is because I needed something with a lot more rotaries than what I had on my Thrustmaster Warthog or the X52 Pro, which is still the stick that I'm using for all my crappier games. As you can see, the X55 has several rotaries included. I really like the fact that it has a rotary axis here, a rotary axis here, and another rotary axis in the back. Also included are two more rotaries that are included right here. So how does this X55 compare? Well, first, let's go back. If you remember, a little while back, I took a huge dump in a review against the X52. A lot of people might have misunderstood why that is. Here, we have the X52 Pro. This is a stick that I still use because the Warthog HOTAS isn't very good for all of the other games that you need to use for, let's say, Shit Thunder or Elite Dangerous, Star Citizen, any of those games that are out right now. A lot of people who went on the video and said that the X52 was actually a fantastic stick and they had no issues or no problems with it whatsoever, I agree with them. I agree with them because they got a different version of the X52. Now, this is the X52 Pro, we're not talking about this stick. In 2007, Cytec got bought out by Mad Catz for around 30 million or so. As soon as that happened, something went wrong in production, because there was a massive increase in DOAs. And that is where the problem started with the X52 and why people are having issues with it. So anybody that has the X52 and they have no issues with it whatsoever, those guys are lucky because they got the pre-2007 version. And those sticks apparently are fine and had far fewer DOAs out of the factory. It's only after Mad Catz got involved that things started going downhill. So the X52 Pro is exactly the same as the X52. The only difference is they went ahead and changed and fixed all the problems that the X52 was having. So that's why I have this, because I need it for all my other crappier games that my Thrustmaster Warthog just isn't really cut out for. But for what it is, the X52 Pro, I've had far fewer issues, and it is a good enough stick for all the crappier games. But I need something with much more accuracy, which is why I vote for the Thrustmaster Warthog if you have the money. But for the people who don't have the money and they need something with a lot of HOTAS, the X52 Pro is pretty much a pretty good deal for you. So, that aside, 55. Right out of the box, the things that come with it is, of course, the stick and the throttle. You have what appears to be a manual and a box which contains springs that you can change for your joystick. Apparently, they probably listened to the fact that people were complaining that the X52 and the 52 Pro springs were made out of butter. The problem, however, was that this isn't quite a manual. What this is just a bunch of pretty little pictures, and it's great, but it doesn't, for example, explain how to remove the spring from the joystick. And you would think that would be pretty important, wouldn't you? The very first thing that I did was I grabbed the stick and the throttle and I just started playing around with it just to see how it feels. And immediately I already didn't like what I was feeling. So the wonderful thing about this stick is that it's an exact replica of the real thing. And of course the Air Force put a lot of detail and made sure that the pilots were comfortable with what they were dealing with. So when I place my hand over here, and I have an average size hand, I can touch all these buttons considerably easy. As you can see, this is definitely the easiest thing to do. And this is a pretty important button because it is your countermeasure button, except for other planes like the F-18, for example, that changed this to the master mode button, essentially. But, you know, whatever. And I can access all these buttons without too much strain. The buttons here are the only two that you really need to do any shifting with your wrist. So if I'm sitting comfortably like this, I can access the pinky switch, the lever, and that's fine. The trigger obviously is okay. And when you deal with the weapon release, you might need to move your thumb just a little bit in order to push it. But as you can tell, my wrist is stationary. It's just a little motion up here that I need to make in order to strain to touch this button. And then you have your trim. Now this trim is probably the hardest hat to get to with the thumb. But they thought about this because, as you can see, the DMS hat key over here is nice and flat. They've extended and protruded the trim in order to make it easier to touch. So I don't need to strain to bring the thumb all the way up and do this. I could if I wanted to. But I can keep it here and do this all I want without having to shift my entire wrist up. As you can see, it is nice and stationary at the base. And of course, on the side, I have my master mode. No strain whatsoever. My finger just extends out and everything's peachy. Okay, let's see how the 55 does. First thing I'm going to say is, of course it's plastic, of course it's cheap, but that's because it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be a cheaper alternative than the Thrustmaster Warthog. And that's a good thing. You can tell that Mad Catz, or Cytec, or whoever the hell, what they want to call themselves, wanted to do was be a direct competitor to the Thrustmaster Warthog. And that's a good thing, because we need cheaper alternatives than the Thrustmaster. And I'll be the first to admit it. Because this thing is not cheap, although it is selling for less than $400 nowadays. You can get it for around $350, maybe even cheaper, now that Black Friday and Cyber Monday is coming around. So, the plastic and everything I can deal with. This plastic here feels very nice. It's got a almost rubbery feel to it, but it is plastic. It's definitely something that you don't see on the X52 and an X52 Pro, so thumbs up for that. Sit my wrist on here. Of course, it feels cheap and plasticky, but we're gonna ignore that. So, this button over here is not a four-way directional hat like most people thought that it was going to be. It is a single press button, which was a little disappointing, but I knew about this before I bought it, obviously. It's something you can deal with, so it's fine. You have your pinky, which is a nice big and flat button, and it works just fine. Then you have your lever, which activates rather early, so you don't need to spring it all the way back like you do with the Thrustmaster Warthog. So these two buttons are all okay. And then we get to these buttons. And here is where you see that Cytec, or Mad Catz, basically dropped the ball. Now, at first view, this looks fine. But for someone like me who has owned a Thrustmaster and has had no issues with moving my thumb around and hitting all the hat keys, as soon as I put my wrist over here, oh boy. The X52, this platform, you can move up and down. So you can move your wrist up and down to position it very well with all the buttons. You can no longer do that. Okay, so you're stuck with this. So when you're holding this stick like this, and you don't have a very long thumb, you're not going to be holding this hat key on the center. So with my wrist at the base, you're basically stuck holding this from the bottom, which isn't too big of a deal. But it is an extremely awkward concave type of hat key to have here. I'm not entirely sure where they went with this, but whatever. It still works. I can deal with this. And then there's the DMS hat key. Do you see a problem? Look how much I need to move my thumb. This looks fucking awkward because it is. I don't understand what... Sitting at the base. Everything is fine. This is okay. Although it doesn't look like there's much of a difference, I'm telling you right now that I feel a difference. I feel no strain on my tendon, on my thumb. Here, I feel very strained. So I will probably need to hold this stick maybe in this position, but this just feels awkward. Like I am pulling my thumb to the maximum to the right just to keep this in the center. I do not like it. But that's not even the worst of it. The worst of it is up here, would be the trim hat key. So as you can see on the Thrustmaster, the hat key protrudes quite a bit in comparison to the DMS, which is nice and flat. Because they thought about the way that this is positioned in such a high upper right corner. So it's kind of weird to try and get to it, like this is great, and then you have this. But because it protrudes like this, I can access all four sides of this without having to move my wrist up off the base. As you can see this, I would need to do that. But no, I can access it quite easily. and my wrist stays at the base all the fucking time. 55. They went and fucking reversed that shit and made this stick out and this be inwards and up and to the right. What the actual fuck, Cytec? Are you fucking kidding me? This obstructs my way into this hat key. This is poor fucking planning. So I need to now raise my wrist off the fucking base just so I can touch it. And it's not like I can't even access this bottom part over here, like I would be able to access here, because it's stuck on this fucking button up here. Nope. So now I need to do this and awkwardly lift my entire fucking hand to get that done. Great. Awesome job. This is fine. This is fine. I do need to raise my thumb in order to get there. I'm not gonna lie, but my wrist still sits at the base and I can still access it because it protrudes out, so it's easy access to the thumb. And I don't need to do this in order to fucking press it. Here, sitting at the base again. And now I'm stuck between these two buttons over here, which you do press and trying to get to that button. Still not as bad as this fucking key. I can deal with that, because now I sound like I'm being picky, and probably maybe I am a little bit. But it is painful. Painful. And we're not even done here. This key, which is supposed to be the master mode key, or whatever the fuck else you want to put it at. Remember when I showed you this? Nice and comfortable, sitting over here. That's it. Done. Sitting at the base again. Okay, let's see if I can hit that button as easily as I could over there. Oh, what's this? Oh, I fucking can't, can I? Now I need to raise my wrist and off the base like this in order to access that button. So again, not a very comfortable fucking stick. And then of course you have a single stage trigger, not a dual stage trigger. Of course, not a big deal. They've basically went backwards in constructing these joysticks since the 65. Great. Whatever, you can deal with that. It's not the biggest issue to have a two-stage trigger nowadays. It's only if you're looking at the DCS A10 and some of the next generation fighters that are going to be coming out, like the F-18 for example, which also uses a two-stage trigger, but you know, we're not going to get into that. So this is deeply disappointing, and just because of that alone, I am shipping this back. I hate it. I don't like it. I played about 2 hours with this and my wrist was exhausted. I said fuck it, I'm not dealing with that. You can forget about it. Alright, and what about the throttle? When I first got the throttle, I actually couldn't move the throttle forward. The friction lever on the side was set to the very maximum, which is, you know, whatever, it's okay. But I literally couldn't push it forward. It was impossible. So I started twisting it back, and there's actually no indication when this wheel's supposed to stop. It just keeps going. Like, it took, I'd say, about a good 20 to 30 rotations just to get it to the absolute maximum back. And even then, this is very tough to push forward and back. Which, you know, it could be good for you, it could be bad, I don't know. Personally, I kind of don't like it, but it's not something that I would put it as a negative per se, just my personal preference. And as far as the rotating positions up here, this is absolutely fine because you can access it with your pinky. That's great. The buttons in the front, these two are okay. This button is fucked up because I don't exactly have the longest of pinkies. As you can tell, my pinky will not reach all the way around to this weird shape that they've created. I can only access the very tippy toe, and it is an up and down hat key. But, you know, something you can probably deal with. It's not that big of an issue, but it shows you that this is just badly created. These buttons on the side, they're two-way switches. They're fine. You have rotating knobs. This is fine, cute, great. This, great. You know, not too different from your X52 anyway. Standard, and then you have a three-way master mode switch button, which you used to have on the joystick on this side, and they decided to put it here. That looks great. You of course have your split throttle, so you can split it, and it splits very easily, much more easily than the Thrustmaster Warthog, I will admit. So they've done a good job there. And these two rotating knobs are interesting because they also push in as a button, and they do have a, so if this is the maximum left turn, if I push it right, you hit this notch here, you feel a notch, this is the middle position, and then it pushes right. I like that. That's cool. Same thing happens here, where you push it forward. This is the maximum. That's the middle part. You can hear that click. And the maximum to the side. Problem. Here I can access the button. Middle, I can access the button. Go to the maximum here, and it's stuck. Great. You have your slider, a button, your mouse, which is in a pretty good position. I like these two buttons. And then you come up against these two fucking things. Poor fucking placement again. No, this is great that I can push this button, but if I'm accessing these buttons and I was playing Elite Dangerous with this, I have this set to my thrusters and here for my countermeasures, and I was hitting these buttons all the time. And because they're so small, small buttons like this do not work well for hack keys. And the reason for that is because you do not hit in one axis very easily. You tend to hit two axes by accident. And this happened a lot. Like, I really try to get used to it. And 2 hours is probably not the greatest stretch for me to do this, but it's not a very good placement for these two things. Like, I don't mind them being down here, but there should have been more spacing between them. I really wish that they actually thought this through a little bit more. And I really don't want to be nitpicky. Like, I really don't want to be nitpicky, but I got this because I wanted this to work. I really did. I wanted to throw the X52 Pro out, well, give it off to one of my friends who doesn't have a joystick, and have this for myself instead. But I can't. I need to return this. I am not happy with this whatsoever. The X52 was definitely much far worse because that one didn't work. Actually, when I first got this didn't work either. The throttle worked, but this didn't. Let me show you why. So what they've done is they did the whole base thing where you can take apart the stick and it arrives like this, which is the same thing that happens here in the Thrustmaster. Great, you know, that's not bad. And I still haven't figured out exactly how to take the spring apart and change the springs, but I'll do that later. But as you can tell, it's got these gold things that don't go down like a millimeter per se. So I took a look at the connectors, and these connectors are also very fucking thin. And what's more is that they press inwards. So what happened was, when I tried plugging this in, probably one of those pins didn't connect in as it's supposed to. So I had an axis control, so I can move this around. But as far as the buttons, none of the buttons worked. And I went on the forums and I saw that there is a rather large amount of people who are having this issue. So if this doesn't click in correctly, you need to take it apart and you need to try and plug it back in and see if it works. And it's, again, painful. Painful design. This was poorly planned out. Let me show you what the base of this looks like. Deep connections inside. I mean, you can't fuck that up. You just can't. I mean, I don't expect this kind of build quality, obviously, on a cheaper stick, but if you're going to do something like this, at least I know that this is in and all the pins are in. Here, I'm not entirely fucking sure. Such a pain. So I almost had to return this just because I thought it was a dead stick upon, you know, straight out of the box. Now, the springs. I haven't tried the other springs yet. But with this spring, and I think this is the same for all of them, what happens is I actually have to put a lot of force, well, I won't say a lot, but let's say a considerable amount of force to push it in initially. And I like that because that's what I got this. This spring is very strong, but it's uniform. What I mean is I push this very hard in, and then right around here, it stops with the tension the same as it was over here. And it loosens up and it almost like falls in. So it feels like it's not uniform like this spring is or the other joysticks are. There's something really weird, and I'm not sure if I need to break this stick in order for that to be fixed, but I think it's got to deal with the way that this spring and this platform at the bottom acts. And it is very awkward to fly that way precisely, for example. So a lot of force and then no force almost whatsoever at the edges. So that was very weird for me, and I didn't quite like it, but it is something that I can deal with. But the button placements and the strain over here is abysmal, and by that alone, I'm shipping this back. So that's my review of the X55. Sorry if you don't feel the same way. Maybe you have a different hand layout and maybe it works better for you. Or perhaps if you haven't had a stick like this to compare how this feels in comparison to something like this, then you won't really see the difference if you just bought this for the first time and you're very happy with it. If you get it and you're happy with it, great, fantastic. But I just wanted to make people aware of the awkwardness of how they place these buttons, and the build of it it's just I can't. I don't think I'll buy another Cytec product ever again, except the pedals. The pedals were actually pretty good. So see you guys later. Cheers.